Welcome back, you night owls. Tonight we're taking a deep, decidedly unsanitary dive into the world of Tudor England. Imagine the flickering candlelight, the scent of stale ale and wood smoke, and the constant low hum of a city that never truly sleeps. In this world, the line between luxury and absolute filth is surprisingly thin, and the jobs people did were often, well, let's just say they would make your Monday morning commute feel like a spa day. You'll hear about people who literally worked with human waste, who risked their lives with every bite they took, and who handled tasks so profoundly grim you probably won't survive this journey with your sense of smell intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. You can also drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Alright, settle in, because our first stop on this grand tour of awful employment is a job so intimate, so profoundly bizarre, it almost defies belief. You are the groom of the stool. Forget your fancy titles and your courtly duties. Your entire existence revolves around one thing, the king's bowel movements. You stand not as a knight or a diplomat, but as the king's most trusted and profoundly hands-on servant. Your job, in its most basic form, is to assist the king with his excretory needs. It sounds like a joke, doesn't it? But this was a real and incredibly powerful position in the Tudor court. The name itself, groom of the stool, comes from the stool, or a special chair with a pot or chamber underneath, which the king used as a toilet. And you, as the groom, are responsible for every aspect of this profoundly private affair. You fetch the stool, you prepare the basin, and you provide a bowl of warm water and towels for the king to wash his hands after he's finished. You even have to deal with the aftermath, but we won't get too descriptive there. This isn't just about cleaning up. Your access to the king is unparalleled. You're with him in his most unguarded moments. You hear things. You see things. You're a silent witness to the king's private thoughts, his health woes, and his most intimate conversations. This proximity makes you an invaluable confidant, a gatekeeper to the most powerful man in the kingdom. You're not just a servant, you're a trusted advisor. This is a mainstream historical fact. The role of the groom of the stool existed for centuries in the English monarchy, and its holder was a person of immense status. For instance, Sir William Compton, who served Henry VIII, was a close friend and confidant, and his position allowed him to amass significant wealth and influence. The perks of the job are as bizarre as the job itself. As the groom, you get to keep the clothes the king discards, which are often lavish and worth a fortune. You're also exempt from taxes, and you're granted the authority to give orders to other royal servants on behalf of the king. You are, in essence, a royal enforcer. But this isn't just a tale of power and privilege, it's also a story of immense risk. You are, after all, handling the king's health. You have to be knowledgeable about his diet, his constitution, and his general well-being. Any sign of illness, any change in his stool, is a matter of state importance, and you are the first to notice. You must report these findings to the royal physicians, but it's a tricky dance. If you misreport or, heaven forbid, miss a sign of a serious illness, you could easily find yourself out of a job, or worse. The line between trusted confidant and scapegoat is razor thin. Historians still argue whether the physical duties of the groom of the stool were always carried out by the holder of the office, or if, in later periods, the title became more of an honorific. The fringe tidbit here is that there's some evidence that later grooms, as the position became more prestigious, may have delegated the dirtiest aspects of the job to a lower-ranking servant, while keeping the power and proximity to the king. But in the early Tudor period, it's highly likely the job was exactly as advertised. A deeply personal, hands-on role. The title alone, with its blunt, almost comical name, suggests a time when roles were described with a sort of brutal honesty. Imagine the dinner parties. So, what do you do? A fellow courtier might ask. Oh, I'm the groom of the stool. I help the king with his business. You can almost feel the awkward silence. But here's the thing. You would be a highly respected, deeply influential person. Your opinion would be sought out. Your proximity to the king would make you a powerful ally and a dangerous enemy. It's a job where you don't just know the king's secrets, you know his secrets intimately. The ultimate paradox of Tudor court life, the most powerful man in the kingdom is also the one most vulnerable to a servant who knows his every digestive detail. It's a job that perfectly captures the strange, often contradictory nature of the era, where power could be found in the most unexpected and unappealing places. The groom of the stool is a powerful reminder that history is not always glamorous. Sometimes it's just really, really gross. But even in that grossness, there is a story of power, trust, and the bizarre nature of privilege in a time long past. And that, my friends, is just the beginning. Now let's try to get the smell of that image out of our heads before we move on to the next delightful job. Welcome back. You're still with me. I appreciate that. You've just emerged from the king's private chambers, having witnessed a level of intimacy and trust that is, frankly, mind-boggling. You've seen the sheer power that comes from being present for the most vulnerable moments of the most powerful person in the realm. Now let's pivot slightly, but stay within the orbit of the monarch's daily life. If the groom of the stool has his hand on the king's health from one end, the royal Tudor taster holds a similar but far more immediately perilous responsibility at the other. Your job today is to eat. Simple, right? But with every bite, every sip, you are playing a high-stakes game of Russian roulette with your life. You are the king's taster, a crucial line of defence against poison. This wasn't a job for just anyone. It required immense trust and a steely resolve. You stand by the king's table, watching the parade of dishes as they are brought in from the kitchens. The air is thick with the scent of roasted meat, spiced wine, and the nervous energy of the court. You don't get to enjoy the meal. Your enjoyment is a matter of pure, simple survival. Before any dish touches the king's lips, a portion is placed on a separate plate for you. You must taste a bit of everything. The bread, the roasted capon, the delicate fish, the rich sauces, even the wine. Every single morsel. You must show no hesitation. You must eat with a calm, deliberate air, as if this is the most normal thing in the world, while a tiny, frantic voice in the back of your mind is screaming, "Is this it? Is this the one?" The king watches you, his eyes studying your every reaction. A twitch, a sudden paleness, a cough, any sign of distress, and the entire meal is thrown out. The cooks are interrogated and your life is in the balance, regardless of the outcome. The concept of a taster is a mainstream historical fact, found in royal courts throughout history. But in the paranoid atmosphere of the Tudor era, it took on a particular grim significance. The threat of assassination was constant, and poison was considered a particularly insidious and cowardly method. Henry VIII, with his endless cycle of wives and enemies, had a very real reason to fear it. A taster was not just a precaution. They were a necessary part of the security apparatus, a human test kit. This is a job where your success is measured by the king's continued breathing, and your failure is a very personal and painful death. There's a quirky or fringe tidbit related to this role. It wasn't just a matter of poison in the food. The taster was also a human lie detector. Part of the job was to watch the faces of the kitchen staff and food preparers as they served the king. Any sign of nervousness, any furtive glance, could be grounds for suspicion. The taster was essentially a first-line psychological profiler, an amateur detective whose life was the ultimate collateral in the investigation. You had to be a master of reading people, a skill that was as important as your ability to eat a wide variety of foods without a gag reflex. The food might be fine, but the nervous chef could be hiding something else, a dagger in his sleeve, a message in a loaf of bread. Your job was not just to taste the food, but to taste the atmosphere. The salary for this job was probably quite good, and you were likely given a generous pension if you survived long enough to retire, which, let's be honest, was a big if. You also had the unique honour of being the only person besides the king who was allowed to sit and eat in his presence. This was a symbol of extreme trust and status, a bizarre contrast to the reality of your daily risk. Imagine the conversations at court. Did you see how the taster's hand trembled today? Do you think the venison was off? Your health was a subject of gossip and speculation, a macabre sideshow for the rest of the court. Historians still argue whether the taster's role was more for show than for actual security. Some scholars suggest that the position was as much a political statement, a public demonstration of the king's power and the lengths to which he would go to protect himself, as it was a practical precaution. Others maintain that, given the genuine threat of assassination, the taster was a very real and vital part of royal security. It's a fascinating debate, as it gets to the heart of how paranoia and power intersect in a royal court. Was it all a grim theatre, or was it a genuinely terrifying job with life or death consequences every single day? Given the lack of reliable antidotes for most poisons of the time, the job was probably just as terrifying as it sounds, regardless of its symbolic value. You're a man or woman who with every meal is essentially saying to the king, I trust you to not kill me by proxy. I trust the chain of command, the cooks, the suppliers. I trust that this isn't my last meal. And the king, in turn, trusts you to not make a mistake, to not miss a subtle change in flavour, to not be an enemy in disguise. It is a profoundly symbiotic and profoundly dangerous relationship. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen we'll get to later? The risk involved there is skin irritation. The risk here is a sudden excruciating demise. A far worse outcome, I'd say. So you stand there, a silent sentinel, a grim shadow at the royal table. The king dines, jokes, and conducts state business, while you, the taster, a person who has become intimately familiar with the tastes of death, simply eat and wait. With every passing meal, you grow more experienced, more attuned to the subtle notes of a dish, and more certain of the randomness of your own mortality. It's a career where your promotion is a long, healthy life, and your retirement is, well, hopefully not an early grave. A truly horrifying way to make a living, don't you think? All right, you've survived the royal dinner service. You can breathe a sigh of relief. The king is still alive, and so, for now, are you. But let's leave the gilded halls of the palace and step out into the muck and mire of Tudor London. The city is a vibrant, bustling place, but it's also profoundly, overwhelmingly filthy. The streets are a chaotic mix of people, animals, and refuse, and beneath it all and behind the buildings is a sanitation nightmare. This is where you come in. You, my friend, are a gong farmer. The name itself, gong farmer, sounds almost charming, doesn't it? Like a person who tends to a garden of percussive instruments. But the reality is far from it. The word gong is an old term for a cesspit, and your job is to farm, or empty, those pits. The gas, primarily methane and hydrogen sulfide, can be incredibly dangerous, and is a silent, invisible threat. One unlucky spark from a lantern and you could be a human firework. The work is back-breaking and disgusting. You use a shovel to scoop the semi-solid waste into buckets, which are then hoisted up by your colleagues. It's slow, messy, and every single inch of you is coated in a foul-smelling film. This is not a job for the faint of heart, or for anyone with a weak gag reflex. And yet, it's a mainstream historical fact that this was an absolutely essential service in any Tudor town or city. Without gong farmers, the pits would overflow, diseases would spread even more rapidly than they already did, and the entire city would become a pestilential swamp. You are, in a deeply ironic way, a public health hero. The pay for a gong farmer was surprisingly good, a quirky or fringe tidbit that underscores just how awful the job was. The risk to your health, the social stigma, and the sheer physical and olfactory torment meant that you had to be paid well to do it. You could earn as much as a skilled craftsman, but you were at the bottom of the social ladder. No one wanted to be near you. You were an outcast, defined by the work you did and the smell that clung to you, no matter how much you washed. Imagine trying to find a wife or a place to live, with everyone recoiling from you, whispering about what you do for a living. You were a necessary evil, a pariah in service of urban cleanliness. There's a constant threat of disease. The pits are a breeding ground for bacteria and viruses. Small cuts on your hands or legs can become infected, leading to serious illness or even death. The air is filled with noxious fumes, and a moment of carelessness can mean a fatal fall into the muck. The darkness and the enclosed space add a claustrophobic terror to the job. You are alone with the filth, the sounds of scuttling rats, and the constant threat of a slow and agonizing death by gas inhalation. It's a truly horrifying thought. Remember the groom of the stool, who at least had the dignity of the king's presence? You, the gong farmer, have only the company of human waste and a few fellow labourers. Historians still argue whether the high wages for gong farmers were a genuine reflection of the job's difficulty and danger, or if it was also a form of danger pay that served to keep these labourers at the bottom of the social hierarchy. The argument suggests that by paying them well, society could ensure they remained a separate and ostracised class, a necessary and yet reviled part of the urban fabric. It's a debate that highlights the complex and often cruel social dynamics of the time. The work may have been essential, but the person who did it was deemed disposable. So, you finish your work for the night. You hoist the last bucket out, and you begin the grim task of transporting the waste to a nearby field or river, usually with a handcart. The journey itself is a slow, methodical march of shame and stench. You pass by homes where people are asleep, blissfully unaware of the foul parade moving through their streets. You are a silent ghost, a spectre of the city's own waste, a grim reminder of the price of progress. The moon shines down on you, illuminating the filth on your clothes and the grime under your fingernails. You get home, and the smell follows you inside. It's in your hair, on your skin, and it permeates your dreams. It's a job that you can't leave at the work site. It's a part of you, for as long as you can stomach it. A gong farmer's life is a testament to the sheer desperation and grim necessity of Tudor society. It's a job that makes you appreciate every single bit of modern sanitation technology. The next time you flush a toilet, just take a moment to be thankful that you don't have to be the one who empties what's on the other side. This is a job that is in every conceivable way horrifying, but without it, the cities would have collapsed under their own filth. So, raise a glass, from a safe distance of course, to the humble and profoundly putrid gong farmer. You've managed to escape the nightmarish world of the gong farmer, but don't get too comfortable just yet. The foul smells of Tudor England are not confined to the sewage pits. They are everywhere, woven into the very fabric of society. Now you find yourself in a different kind of industry, one that at first glance seems relatively harmless. You're a fuller, a tradesperson responsible for one of the most vital steps in textile production, cleaning and thickening wool cloth. It sounds clean and simple, doesn't it? Perhaps even a little cosy. Well, the reality is far from it. Your primary cleaning agent is a substance that would make you gag just thinking about it. Human urine. The process of fulling, also known as tucking or walking, is ancient. But in the Tudor period, it was a major part of the English economy. Wool was the country's most important export, and every bolt of cloth had to be fulled to make it ready for sale. The raw wool, fresh off the loom, is a loose, greasy fabric, full of natural lanolin and dirt. Your job is to make it dense, felted, and clean. To do this, you need a powerful degreasing agent, and in the Tudor era, there was nothing more readily available or effective than stale, fermented urine, often called Tudor lye or chamber lye. The ammonia in the urine acts as a potent detergent, breaking down the oils and dirt in the wool. Your workplace is a fulling mill, which uses water power to pound the cloth, or, in smaller operations, a large vat where the fulling is done by hand or, more accurately, by foot. You and your fellow fullers trudge barefoot in a tub of warm, stale urine, stomping on the wool cloth for hours on end. The warm liquid squishes between your toes, and the stench is so powerful it stings your nostrils and makes your eyes water. The air in the fulling mill is a thick, humid cloud of ammonia fumes and the musty smell of wet wool. You do this all day, every day, your skin perpetually wrinkled and stained, your clothes reeking of your profession. It's a job that you simply cannot leave behind at the end of the day. The smell becomes a part of you. This use of urine as a cleaning agent is a mainstream historical fact, a fascinating and stomach-turning example of how pre-industrial societies made use of what was readily available. The process wasn't just about cleaning, it was also about felting the cloth, a process where the wool fibres interlock and shrink, creating a more durable and water-resistant fabric. So, you aren't just a human laundromat, you're a key part of the production line that makes English wool so valuable. The quality of the finished cloth depends directly on your ability to trudge and stomp through a vat of human waste. There's a quirky or fringe tidbit related to the source of the urine. It was so valuable that people would often collect it in their homes in pots called Jordan or chamber pots and sell it to the fullers. Imagine the Tudor equivalent of a recycling program where people were paid for their own bodily waste. It's a bizarre form of commerce that underscores the practical, no-nonsense approach to resource management in the era. People wouldn't just empty their chamber pots out the window, they'd save it up to make a little extra money. It's a grim reminder that in a world with no concept of modern chemicals, people had to get creative with what they had. Historians still argue whether the use of urine was primarily due to a lack of other options, or if it was genuinely considered the most effective and efficient method for fulling wool. The debate highlights the different ways we can interpret historical practices. Was this a sign of primitive technology, or was it a clever, albeit disgusting, use of a renewable resource? Given the sheer volume of wool being produced, the amount of urine needed was immense, so it's likely a combination of necessity and practicality. The process was cheap and effective, and in a time when profits were paramount, that was all that mattered. The job wasn't just disgusting, it was physically demanding. The constant stomping could lead to injuries, foot problems, and joint pain. The ammonia fumes, over time, could cause respiratory issues. You were constantly at risk of skin infections from the cuts and scrapes on your feet, which were perpetually exposed to a biological soup of who knows what. Remember the gong farmer's fear of disease. You face a similar but perhaps slower threat. Your work is a quiet assault on your body, a steady wearing down of your health in the service of making someone else's coat a little bit nicer. You finish your day, covered in filth, your nose no longer able to distinguish the smell. You are, in every sense of the word, a human sponge for human waste. The finished cloth, once it's rinsed and dried, will be pristine, its terrible origins completely erased. But you will carry the mark of your profession with you always. It's a job that is as crucial as it is gross, a testament to the strange and sometimes vile work that was considered commonplace in Tudor society. So, the next time you put on a woolen sweater or a tweed coat, just take a moment to think about the people who, centuries ago, had to trample through vats of pee to make it happen. It's a sobering thought, isn't it? And it's a perfect transition to our next job, which also involves a lot of grinding and dust, but with a different and perhaps even more dangerous substance. You've left the foul-smelling vat of the fulling mill, but the sounds of industry still follow you. The rhythmic thudding of hammers, the groan of machinery, and a low, persistent grinding sound that sends a shiver down your spine. Now, you are a bone grinder, a worker whose job it is to take the discarded bones of animals and turn them into something useful. This sounds like a noble, resourceful pursuit, doesn't it? A testament to a society that wasted nothing, but the reality of your job is far from noble. It is a choking, dusty, and potentially deadly existence. The bones you work with come from all over: butcher shops, slaughterhouses, and even the carcasses of animals that have died from disease. They arrive in a state of decay, often with bits of gristle and flesh still clinging to them. Your first task is to sort them, to remove the foreign matter and to prepare them for the grinder. This process is, in itself, not particularly pleasant, but the real horror begins when you start to grind them. The bones are fed into a mill, a large heavy apparatus of stone or metal that crushes them into a fine white powder. And you, the bone grinder, are surrounded by this powder all day, every day. The air in your workshop is thick with bone dust. It coats your clothes, your hair, and your skin. But most alarmingly, it coats the inside of your lungs. Every breath you take is a gasp of fine, sharp particles. Over time, this dust will cause a host of respiratory ailments, from chronic coughs to a debilitating and often fatal lung disease. This is a mainstream historical fact. The inhalation of bone dust was a major occupational hazard, much like the silica dust that plagued miners. Your job is a slow, methodical march toward a painful and premature end, all in the service of turning waste into a commodity. The bone meal you produce has a variety of uses, and this is where the resourcefulness of the era comes into play. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that a significant portion of the bone meal was used as a fertilizer for crops. It's rich in phosphorus and calcium, two essential nutrients for plant growth. So in a strange way, your dusty toil is helping to feed the nation. Bone meal was also used to make a range of other products, including glue and as an abrasive for polishing. The bones of the dead, once buried or discarded, were now being resurrected for use in everyday life, a grim cycle of life and death playing out in your workshop. Historians still argue whether the bone grinding trade was a specialty occupation or if it was often a side job for people in other trades, such as butchers or farmers. The debate speaks to the lack of specialised and regulated labour in the Tudor era. Were you a full-time bone grinder, or did you simply grind bones as needed to supplement your income? Given the hazards involved, it's likely a job that few would have chosen as a full-time career unless they had no other options. The high-risk, low-reward nature of the work suggests it was a job for the most desperate, those who had no other way to put food on the table. Your day is a symphony of sound and sensation, the constant grinding, the feel of the dust in your throat and nose, the perpetual taste of dry, chalky powder on your tongue. There are no masks, no ventilation systems, no safety precautions. You're a lone figure in a cloud of white dust, a phantom of the industry that surrounds you. Remember the gong farmer's shame? Your shame is more insidious. It's not a visible filth, but an invisible one. It's a sickness that settles in your chest and never leaves. It's a job that quietly and insidiously kills you, one breath at a time. The death isn't quick and violent like that of the royal taster. It's a slow, agonizing suffocation that makes every day a little bit harder than the last. But you have to work. The money, however meagre, is a necessity. You're a small cog in a large machine, a nameless labourer whose life is less valuable than the product you produce. You might pass a beggar on the street and think, at least you have the dignity of the open air. Your poverty is a physical one, a hollowness in your lungs that nothing can fill. And as the sun sets and you trudge home, you leave a faint trail of white powder in your wake, a ghostly footprint of your daily struggle. The dust clings to your skin, a fine layer that never quite washes off, a constant reminder of the price you're paying for your survival. The bone grinder's toil is a testament to the grim realities of life in Tudor England. It is a world where even the most seemingly mundane tasks could hold a terrifying and hidden danger. It's a job that makes you appreciate every bit of modern industrial safety. The next time you see a bag of fertilizer or a piece of polished wood, just take a moment to think about the people who, centuries ago, had to risk their very breath to make it happen. It's a sobering thought and a perfect transition to our next job, which also involves a lot of grinding, but of a different and perhaps even more chilling kind. The dust of the bone grinder's workshop has settled, but the grime of Tudor England still clings to you. Let's trade the choking air of the mill for the damp, squelching terrain of a muddy bog. Your new calling is one that, on the surface, might seem less dangerous than our previous jobs. You're a leech collector, a specialist in a grim but essential trade, for in a world without antibiotics and with a very limited understanding of medicine, leeches were considered a cure-all for everything from a headache to a fever. Your job is to supply these slimy, blood-sucking creatures to barbers, surgeons and apothecaries. Your workday begins at dawn, but it's not a gentle walk through a field. You must wade into a stagnant, murky marsh or a weed-choked pond. The water is cold, and the ground beneath your feet is a soft, sucking mud that threatens to swallow your boots, or, more accurately, your bare legs, because you are the bait. The most effective way to catch leeches is with your own body. You wade into the water, and you wait. The leeches, hungry for blood, will latch onto your legs. You must stand still, ignoring the cold and the discomfort, until you feel the sharp, painless prick of them attaching themselves. It is a slow, unnerving process. You are a human buffet for a squirming mass of parasites. The leeches swell with your blood, and when they are plump and full, you pull them off with a practiced hand and place them in a wet bag or a glass jar. You cannot simply rip them off, as it might damage their jaws and render them useless for later use. It requires a delicate touch and an iron will. This is a mainstream historical fact. Leech collecting was a recognised trade, and it was a brutally uncomfortable and often dangerous one. The demand for leeches, particularly in the 18th and 19th centuries, was so high that it led to the near extinction of some species in parts of Europe. There's a quirky or fringe tidbit to this profession that adds a layer of quiet horror. The leeches don't just bite you, they release an anticoagulant into your bloodstream. This means that after you pull them off, the bites continue to bleed for a significant amount of time. Your legs are covered in tiny weeping puncture wounds, and the blood trickles down into the murky water. You are, quite literally, bleeding for your living. The constant bleeding and the risk of infection in the unsanitary water mean that leech collectors were often plagued by festering sores and ulcers on their legs. You are perpetually unwell, your body a canvas of small bloody wounds. Historians still argue whether the reliance on leech therapy was a sign of genuine medical knowledge at the time, or if it was more akin to a form of folk medicine that persisted due to a lack of other, more effective treatments. The debate highlights the thin line between science and superstition in Tudor medicine. Were the leeches truly helping to balance the humours, as was believed, or were they simply a placebo that, in some cases, might have coincidentally coincided with a patient's natural recovery? The lack of sterile conditions and a genuine understanding of germ theory meant that leech therapy, while seemingly effective in some cases, could also be a source of infection. The dangers of the job aren't just physical. The marshes are home to a variety of other unpleasant creatures. Water snakes, venomous spiders, and other biting insects are a constant threat. A simple slip in the mud could lead to a life-threatening injury. You're also at the mercy of the elements, the biting cold of an early morning, the oppressive heat of a midday sun. Your livelihood depends entirely on the health of the marsh and the population of leeches within it. If the marsh dries up or is over-harvested, your entire income vanishes. You're a human resource, a living, breathing commodity in a brutal and unforgiving economic system. You finish your day, your legs sore and bleeding, your bag filled with squirming leeches. The sight of them, even in their glass jar, is unsettling. You walk back to town, your feet squelching in your wet boots, a silent, bleeding testament to the strangeness of your profession. You're a pariah, a person whose job is to be bled for money. You're a living example of the brutal reality of work in Tudor England. It's a job that makes you appreciate the comfort of dry land and the wonders of modern medicine. The next time you hear a doctor talk about a simple blood test, just think about the people who, centuries ago, had to wade into a bog to get their blood taken by leeches. This is a job that is, in every conceivable way, horrifying. The quiet, insidious pain, the constant risk of infection, and the profound dehumanization of being a human lure for blood-sucking worms. But without you, the barber surgeons of the era would have been out of a job, and the sick would have had one less cure at their disposal. So, in a way, you are a vital part of the medical ecosystem, a quiet, bloody cog in a larger, even more unsettling machine. And with that thought, we move on to our next job, one that is also intimately connected to the medical world, but with a different, and perhaps even more terrifying kind of bloodletting. You've shed the leeches, both literally and figuratively, but your journey into the horrifying jobs of the Tudor era is far from over. From the squelching mud of the marshes, you now enter the bustling, bloody shop of the Tudor barber surgeon. This is a profession that combines two very different and very dangerous skill sets: cutting hair and cutting into people. In our modern world, we see a clear distinction between a surgeon and a barber. But in Tudor England, the two are often one and the same, and your job is to do both, often with the same unsterilised tools. Your shop is not a pristine operating room. It's a small, crowded space filled with the sharp scent of alcohol and the coppery tang of old blood. A striped pole, red and white, hangs outside your door, a symbol of your trade, the red for blood and the white for the bandages you use. You stand ready, a pair of sharp shears in one hand, a rusty scalpel in the other. Your clientele is varied. One moment you might be giving a gentleman a trim and a shave. The next, you could be setting a broken bone, pulling a rotting tooth, or performing a rudimentary amputation. The concept of the barber surgeon is a mainstream historical fact, a direct result of a time when the medical profession was not as specialised as it is today. Physicians were considered gentlemen, often educated at universities, and they dealt with the patient's humours, prescribing remedies and offering diagnoses based on ancient theories. The physical, messy work of surgery was considered beneath them. That work fell to the barbers, who had the tools and a familiarity with the human body from their daily grooming activities. You're a hybrid, a man of two worlds, neither of which is particularly sanitary. There is a quirky or fringe tidbit to this profession that adds a layer of quiet horror. Since you're not a formally trained physician, you are often working with a very limited understanding of anatomy or disease. Your knowledge is based on practical experience, which means a lot of trial and error and a lot of pain for your patients. A simple tooth extraction can be a brutal affair performed without anaesthesia. A setting of a broken bone is a matter of sheer force and a bit of hope. And an amputation? It is a race against time and infection, with a red-hot cautery iron ready to sear the stump closed to stop the bleeding. The screams of your patients are a common sound in your shop. Historians still argue whether the barber surgeon's trade was truly effective, or if it was more a testament to the human body's ability to heal itself despite the interventions. The debate highlights the vast difference between modern medicine and Tudor medical practices. Did your bloodletting treatments, based on the theory of balancing the four humours, blood, phlegm, black bile and yellow bile, genuinely help, or did they simply weaken the patient, making them more susceptible to disease? The lack of germ theory meant that you were likely introducing more disease into your patients than you were curing. The same blade you used to shave a man's face might be used to lance a boil or cut into a leg. The very essence of your trade was a paradox, a mix of care and carelessness, of healing and harm. The dangers of your job are not just for your patients. You're constantly exposed to disease. A simple cut from your tools could lead to a fatal infection. You're often dealing with people who have festering sores, open wounds and plague-ridden boils. Remember the plague nurse. You're one step removed but still constantly at risk. The job requires a steady hand, a strong stomach, and a deep-seated fatalism. You know that at any moment a patient could die on your table and you could be blamed, or worse, they could survive and you could be blamed for their continued pain. You're a fixture in the community, a necessary evil. People come to you out of desperation when all other options have failed. You are the last resort, the person who deals with the physical realities of a brutal world. The diseases are rampant, the injuries are common, and the pain is a constant companion. You are the one who has to face it all, to look at a festering wound and decide if it's better to amputate or to let the patient die slowly. It is a grim, thankless job, but it is also one that provides a living. As you close your shop for the night, you scrub the blood from your tools and your hands, a futile effort. The smell of blood and disinfectant lingers in the air. The screams of the day echo in your mind. The image of a rotting tooth or a gaping wound is a constant companion. The Tudor barber surgeon's job is a testament to the grim realities of a world without modern medicine. It's a job that makes you appreciate every single bit of modern medical technology. The next time you go to the dentist or a doctor, just take a moment to be thankful that they are not also offering you a haircut. And with that thought, we will move on to our next terrifying job, which also involves a lot of sharp tools and a lot of very unpleasant smells. You've survived the Tudor barber surgeon's bloody and unhygienic shop, but your sensory ordeal is not over. The coppery scent of blood and the sterile scent of alcohol give way to something far more earthy and putrid. You are a tanner, a skilled craftsman who transforms raw animal hides into durable, usable leather. It sounds like a useful trade, a noble craft, doesn't it? The reality, however, is that your existence is one of constant, overwhelming stench, and your hands are forever stained and wrinkled from a lifetime of contact with foul chemicals and decaying animal parts. Your tannery is located on the outskirts of town, usually near a river, for a very good reason. The smell. It's a smell so profound, so all-encompassing, that no one wants you as a neighbour. The air is thick with the scent of rotting flesh, stagnant water, and a variety of foul-smelling chemicals. Your workday begins with the arrival of raw hides, fresh from the slaughterhouse. They're often caked in blood, manure, and mud. Your first task is to clean them, a process that involves scraping off any remaining flesh and fat with a blunt knife. This is a messy, visceral job, and you're covered in a slick film of animal grease and gristle. The real horror begins with the soaking process. The hides are soaked in a series of vats to make them pliable and to remove the hair. The initial soak is often in a vat of water, but the second and most infamous is in a mixture of stale urine and a concoction of dog and pigeon dung. This putrid liquid, known as baiting, is used to soften the hides and remove residual hair and flesh. The ammonia in the urine and the enzymes in the dung help to break down the hide's proteins, but the smell is beyond description. It is a mainstream historical fact that tanners relied on these vile concoctions, and the stench was a hallmark of their trade. You stand in this stench all day, your clothes, your hair, your very skin absorbing the odour. There is a quirky or fringe tidbit related to this process. The quality of the baiting mixture was a point of pride for tanners. They would often have their own secret recipes, a blend of different dungs and urine that they believe produced the best leather. It's a bizarre form of craftsmanship, where the mastery of your trade is measured by your ability to create the most effective and most repulsive chemical brew. Your reputation rests on your ability to make a good, stinking soup for the hides. Historians still argue whether the use of such foul substances was purely a matter of necessity, or if it was also a way to keep the trade in the hands of a few who were willing to tolerate the conditions. The debate highlights the social stratification of the era. The tanner was a necessary part of the economy, but he was also a social pariah, reviled for his smell and his contact with filth. It's a job that guaranteed a good income, but also a life of social isolation. You couldn't just hang out at the local pub after work. People would move away from you. The smell was a brand, a permanent mark of your profession. The final stage of tanning, after the baiting, involves soaking the hides in a strong solution of oak bark and water, known as tannin, from which the word tanning is derived. This process could take months or even years, and the hides must be turned regularly to ensure an even treatment. This part of the job is less putrid, but it's physically demanding. The vats are large and heavy, and the hides are sodden and slick. You're constantly lifting, pushing and turning, your muscles aching at the end of the day. The dangers of your job are not just the stench. The chemicals you work with can be harsh on your skin, causing rashes and burns. The stagnant water in the vats is a breeding ground for bacteria, and a simple cut on your hand could lead to a serious infection. You're constantly at risk, your hands and arms permanently stained by the work. Remember the gong farmer? His work was done at night. You, the tanner, work in the open air, and the smell carries for miles, a grim announcement of your presence. The leather you produce is used for everything from shoes to armour to book covers, but the origins of that leather, the putrid vats and the back-breaking labour are forever hidden from the end user. You go home at night, and the smell of the tannery follows you. It's in your clothes, on your skin, and it permeates your dreams. You're a man or woman who, in the eyes of society, is nothing more than a purveyor of filth, a necessary evil in a world that needs leather but wants nothing to do with how it's made. The tanner's job is a testament to the grim realities of life in Tudor England. It's a job that makes you appreciate the clean, sanitised world we live in today. The next time you see a leather bag or a pair of leather shoes, just take a moment to be thankful that you weren't the one who had to prepare the hides. And with that thought, we move on to our next job, which also involves a lot of filth, but of a different and perhaps even more chilling kind. You've left the foul stench of the tannery behind, but you are not free of filth. The pervasive grime of Tudor England follows you, and now it scurries on 4 legs. You're a rat catcher, a specialist in a grim but essential profession. For in the crowded, unsanitary streets of Tudor towns and cities, rats are more than just a nuisance. They are a constant, terrifying threat. Your job is to battle this menace, and in doing so, you're putting your life on the line with every single rat you catch. Your workday begins with a patrol of the city's alleyways, docks and granaries. You're armed with a variety of crude tools, a long-handled wire cage, a small dog, and a keen eye. You're a silent hunter, stalking through the shadows, listening for the telltale scratching of claws on wood. The rats are everywhere, and they are a sign of the city's profound lack of hygiene. They thrive on the discarded food, the open sewers, and the general refuse that litters the streets. They are a constant living testament to the filth that permeates every corner of Tudor life. The job itself is a brutal and dangerous one. You are constantly in contact with disease-carrying vermin. The rats are not just a nuisance. They are the primary vector for the bubonic plague, the Black Death, which periodically sweeps through Europe and decimates the population. This is a mainstream historical fact. The plague was a recurring and terrifying reality of Tudor life, and the rat catcher, whether he knew it or not, was on the front lines of a war against a silent killer. A bite from a flea on a plague-ridden rat could mean a painful, agonising death within days. You are, in essence, a professional gambler, and your chips are your own life. There is a quirky or fringe tidbit to this profession that adds a layer of quiet horror. Since the Tudor era was a time of limited scientific knowledge, the rat catcher was often seen as a sort of shamanistic figure. People believed that you had a special connection to the vermin, that you could charm them or drive them away. This belief gave you a certain power, and you could charge a high price for your services. But it also meant that if the rats came back, or if a plague outbreak occurred, you could be blamed and even accused of witchcraft. You're a man or woman who is both revered and reviled, a necessary part of society, but also an outsider who is feared and mistrusted. Historians still argue whether the efforts of the rat catchers had a significant impact on plague outbreaks. The debate highlights the vast difference between modern disease control and Tudor efforts. Were your efforts to control the rat population a genuine form of public health, or were they simply a desperate and largely ineffective attempt to combat a force that was too powerful and too insidious to be controlled? Given the lack of understanding of germ theory and the unsanitary conditions of the time, it's likely that the rat catchers were fighting a losing battle. The rats were simply too numerous, and the conditions were too perfect for them to thrive. The dangers of your job aren't just from the rats themselves, you're also at risk from the other creatures that live in the shadows. Weasels, stray dogs, and even other rat catchers are a constant threat. Your livelihood depends on your ability to outsmart and outcompete the other rat catchers in your area. It is a cutthroat, competitive trade, and you're constantly on your guard. You finish your day, your cage filled with a writhing, squealing mass of captured rats. You are covered in filth, your clothes reeking of a mixture of sewer and animal musk. You take your catch to the city's designated disposal site, and you're paid for your work. But the money, however good, is a constant reminder of the risk you're taking. You're a man or woman who is living on borrowed time, and you know it. The sight of a rat scurrying in the corner, the sound of a rustle in the dark, the feel of a flea bite on your arm, these are the constant, terrifying companions of your job. The rat catcher's job is a testament to the grim realities of life in Tudor England. It's a world where even the most seemingly mundane tasks could hold a terrifying and hidden danger. It's a job that makes you appreciate every single bit of modern sanitation and pest control. The next time you see a mousetrap, just think about the people who, centuries ago, had to battle a constant, terrifying menace with their bare hands and a bit of hope. And with that thought, we will move on to our next terrifying job, which also involves a lot of filth, but of a different, and perhaps even more chilling kind. You've survived the battle with the rats, but the stench of death still lingers. We leave the dark alleyways and move to a new, even more macabre corner of Tudor society. Your new job is one that operates in the deepest shadows, where the line between science and sacrilege is blurred. You are a resurrection man, a grave robber whose job it is to exhume freshly buried corpses and sell them to anatomy schools and physicians for dissection. This is not a job for the faint of heart. It is a nocturnal, ethically murky, and incredibly dangerous profession. The demand for human cadavers in the Tudor era was high. As the medical profession began to evolve, there was a growing need for doctors to study human anatomy, but the law only allowed for a very limited number of bodies for dissection, usually those of executed criminals. The supply was nowhere near the demand, and a black market for bodies quickly emerged. You, the resurrection man, are the key supplier in this gruesome market. Your work begins after dark, when the graveyards are silent and the moon is your only witness. You are armed with a shovel, a sack, and a grim determination. The process is a quiet, methodical horror. You and your crew work quickly, digging just enough to get to the coffin. You don't bother to remove the whole coffin, you just break open the lid at the head end and pull the body out. You strip the corpse of its burial clothes, which you can't sell as they are a sign of your crime, and you place it in your sack. The whole process is done in a matter of minutes, a silent, efficient violation of the dead. It is a mainstream historical fact that this trade existed, and it was a lucrative, albeit highly illegal one. The price for a fresh corpse was high, and you could earn a small fortune in a single night. There's a quirky or fringe tidbit that adds to the bizarre nature of your trade. Since you're not a licensed professional, you're often working with a very limited understanding of the legal system. The law at the time made it a crime to steal the clothes and personal belongings of the dead, but it was not as clear on the matter of stealing the body itself. This legal loophole, or the ambiguity of it, allowed you to operate in a grey area where you were technically not committing a major crime, as long as you didn't steal the clothes. This ambiguity was, in itself, a chilling sign of how little value was placed on the human body after death. The law cared more about property than it did about the sanctity of the grave. Historians still argue whether the resurrection men were a necessary evil, providing the bodies needed for scientific advancement, or if they were simply a group of opportunistic criminals who preyed on the grief of the living. The debate highlights the vast difference between modern ethics and Tudor ones. Was it more important to respect the dead, or to advance medical knowledge? The lack of other options for medical students and doctors meant that the resurrection men, for all their horrifying work, were a vital part of the medical ecosystem. They were a grim, necessary cog in the machinery of progress. The dangers of your job are not just legal. The work is physically demanding, and a graveyard at night is a dangerous place. The threat of being discovered is a constant companion. If a watchman or a grieving family member finds you, you could be beaten, or even killed. The public's outrage at the desecration of graves was immense, and they would often take justice into their own hands. You're also dealing with the remains of people who may have died from infectious diseases. The plague, smallpox, and a host of other ailments are a constant threat. You're constantly putting your life at risk for a quick payday. You finish your night's work, a sack slung over your shoulder, and you make your way to the home of a waiting physician. He pays you in cash, and he doesn't ask any questions. You're a silent, nameless purveyor of death, a ghost in the night who makes his living from the bodies of the dead. The money is good, but the work is a constant psychological burden. You're haunted by the faces of the people you have exhumed, the silent witnesses to your crime. The Resurrection Man's job is a testament to the grim realities of life in Tudor England. It's a world where even the most sacred of places, the graveyard, is not safe from the demands of a brutal world. You go home, your clothes stained with mud and the faint smell of decay. You try to forget what you have done, but the image of the open grave, the silent corpse, and the dirt under your fingernails are a constant reminder. The Resurrection Man's job is a testament to the fact that in Tudor England, even after death, you are not safe from the grim realities of a brutal world. And with that chilling thought, we'll move on to our next terrifying job, which also involves a lot of filth, but of a different, and perhaps even more chilling kind. You've crawled out of the graveyard and left the resurrection men to their grim business, but you're still not safe from the filth of Tudor London. We descend now from the surface of the city into its grimy, claustrophobic underbelly. You're a sewer scourer, a human mole whose job it is to clear blockages from the city's rudimentary and overflowing drainage systems. This is a job that combines a profound lack of hygiene with a terrifying physical danger, and it is, in every sense of the word, a murky existence. The city's sewers are not the vast organised networks we have today. They are a jumble of open drains, small stone conduits, and gutters that are constantly choked with refuse. When a major blockage occurs, it's your job to get in there and clear it. Your tools are simple: a shovel, a pick, and a lamp. The work begins with a descent into a world of darkness, filth, and the overpowering stench of human and animal waste. The air is thick with the smell of decay, and the only sound is the sloshing of water and the rustling of rats. The primary danger of the job is not just the filth, it is the physical peril. The conduits are often narrow and unstable, and a sudden collapse could bury you alive. The air is filled with noxious gases, primarily methane and hydrogen sulfide, which can be fatal. A single spark from your lamp could cause a catastrophic explosion, turning your murky workspace into a fiery tomb. This is a mainstream historical fact. The lack of ventilation and the build-up of flammable gases made sewer work incredibly dangerous, and fatalities were common. You are a human canary in a coal mine, a person who is constantly on the verge of being suffocated or blown up by the very refuse you're trying to clear. There is a quirky or fringe tidbit related to your job that adds a layer of grim irony. In the sewers, you're likely to come across all sorts of lost treasures: a dropped coin, a piece of jewellery, or a forgotten tool. These things are all potential finds. This means that, in a strange way, your job is also a form of treasure hunting. But the treasure is not worth the risk, and the coins you find are often covered in filth and carry the risk of disease. Your treasure is a grim reminder that you are a human dredger, a person who sifts through the city's waste for a living. Historians still argue whether the sewer scourers were a specialised trade, or if it was a job for the most desperate, those who had no other choice. The debate highlights the social stratification of the era. The work was so dangerous and disgusting that it's unlikely anyone would have chosen it if they had another option. It was a job for the lowest of the low, a grim testament to the fact that in Tudor England some lives were considered expendable. You're a human drain cleaner, a person who is not even a footnote in the grand history of the era, but without whom the city would have collapsed under its own waste. The physical demands of the job are immense. You are often working in a crouch position, in the dark, with a shovel. You are covered in filth from head to toe, and the water is a cold, stagnant soup of disease. The rats, emboldened by the lack of natural predators, scurry around your feet, a constant living threat. The claustrophobia of the enclosed space, the darkness, and the constant fear of a collapse or an explosion make every single moment a waking nightmare. You are a ghost of the city, a man or woman who works in a world that no one wants to think about, a world of filth and decay. You finish your day, your clothes and skin caked in grime, the smell of the sewer a permanent part of you. The money you earn is good, but it is a small compensation for the risks you take. You go home to a small dark room and you scrub and scrub, but you know you will never be truly clean. the memory of the darkness, the rats, and the overwhelming stench will stay with you forever. The sewer scourer's job is a testament to the grim realities of life in Tudor England. It's a job that makes you appreciate every bit of modern sanitation and infrastructure. The next time you see a manhole cover, just think about the people who, centuries ago, had to crawl into that hole and risk their lives to keep the city from drowning in its own filth. And with that terrifying thought, we will move on to our next job, which also involves a lot of filth, but of a different and perhaps even more chilling kind. You've emerged from the claustrophobic depths of the Tudor sewers, but the memory of the filth and the fear still clings to you. Now, we return to the gilded cages of the royal court, but don't let the finery fool you. This next job is a special kind of torment, one that combines psychological abuse with physical pain. You are the whipping boy, a young nobleman whose sole purpose is to serve as a human punching bag for the young prince. This is a job that is as bizarre as it is cruel, and it is a testament to the strange and often twisted nature of Tudor power. The concept of a whipping boy is a mainstream historical fact, though its prevalence and the details of the job are still debated by historians. The theory behind the practice was simple. The young prince, as a member of the royal family, was considered too sacred to be physically punished. He was, in a sense, untouchable. But what about his transgressions? He couldn't simply be allowed to get away with bad behaviour. The solution was the whipping boy, a companion to the prince who would be punished in his stead. When the prince misbehaved, you, the whipping boy, would be brought forward and flogged for his crimes. The idea was that the prince, seeing his friend in pain, would feel remorse and learn his lesson. Your life is a constant, terrifying dance. You are the prince's companion, his friend and his confidant. You're educated alongside him, you play with him, and you're expected to be his mirror. But you are also his shadow, a person whose existence is a constant reminder of the physical punishment that awaits you if he misbehaves. The prince, for his part, has no incentive to be good. His punishment is, in a way, outsourced to you. He can be as rebellious as he wants, and you are the one who pays the price. You are a living lesson, a grim and silent reminder of the prince's obligations to his family and his kingdom. There's a quirky or fringe tidbit related to this role that adds a layer of quiet horror. Since the whipping boy was often a member of the nobility, he was not just a servant, he was a potential political pawn. His family might have connections to the court, and his position as the prince's companion could be a source of immense power and influence. But it also meant that you were a constant target. If a rival family wanted to undermine the prince, they could do so by targeting you, the whipping boy. Your life is not your own. It is a political tool, a bargaining chip in a high-stakes game of power and influence. Historians still argue whether the whipping boy's role was truly an effective form of discipline. The debate highlights the vast difference between modern educational theory and Tudor ones. Did the practice genuinely instill a sense of guilt and remorse in the prince, or did it simply teach him that he could get away with anything, and that others would pay the price? The psychological damage on both the prince and the whipping boy must have been immense. The prince, who was taught that his actions had no consequences, and the whipping boy, who was taught that his body was a tool for someone else's education. It's a system that seems designed to create a sociopathic tyrant and a psychologically damaged victim. The physical dangers of your job are obvious. The beatings are real, and they are often severe, but the psychological dangers are far more insidious. You're a person whose entire existence is a paradox. You are the prince's closest friend, and yet you are also a tool for his punishment. You're a constant reminder of his power and your own powerlessness. You are an object, a person who is not even a person, but a means to an end. It is a job that is designed to dehumanize you, to turn you into a living, breathing symbol of the prince's guilt. You go through your day, constantly on your guard. A dropped plate, a muttered insult, a poor grade from a tutor. Any of these could be the reason for your next beating. You're living on a knife's edge, constantly trying to predict the prince's behaviour and to mitigate the consequences. You are a quiet, nervous presence, a silent shadow that follows the prince wherever he goes, and when the beating comes, you have to take it without complaint. You have to endure the pain, knowing that it is not your fault, but that it is your burden to bear. The whipping boy's job is a testament to the grim realities of life in Tudor England. It's a job that makes you appreciate the comfort of modern education and the concept of personal responsibility. You go home, and the welts on your back and legs are a constant, painful reminder of your thankless duty. The image of the prince, watching you with a mixture of pity and indifference, is a constant companion. The whipping boy's job is a testament to the fact that in Tudor England, even in the most privileged circles, there was a profound and horrifying kind of cruelty. And with that chilling thought, we will move on to our next job, which also involves a lot of filth, but of a different and perhaps even more chilling kind. You've left the psychological torment of the whipping boy behind, but the world of the royal court still has its own unique miseries. From the king's private chambers and the prince's lesson rooms, we now descend into the belly of the beast, the royal kitchens. Your new job is that of a scullery maid, the lowest ranking servant in the kitchen hierarchy. Your existence is one of relentless, back-breaking labour, a constant struggle against a sea of filth, grease, and grime. This is a job that will make you thank your lucky stars for your dishwasher. Your workday begins before dawn. The kitchens are a bustling, chaotic world, and you are at the very bottom of the food chain. Your job is to wash the dishes, pots, and pans. But this is not a modern, clean kitchen. There is no running hot water, no fancy soaps. The water is often cold, and it is a disgusting, greasy soup by the end of the day. The dishes are caked with old food, and the pots are stained with soot and baked on grease. You are a human dishwashing machine, and you are expected to do it all by hand, day in and day out, with no end in sight. The sheer volume of work is overwhelming. The royal court has hundreds, if not thousands, of people to feed. The meals are extravagant, and the dishes are countless. You're constantly on your feet, your hands perpetually wrinkled and raw from the cold, greasy water. Your back aches from bending over, and your arms ache from scrubbing. The noise of the kitchen is deafening. The clang of pots and pans, the shouting of the cooks, the sizzling of meat. You are a small, anonymous figure in the midst of this chaos, a person whose existence is defined by the endless cycle of dirt and cleanliness. The scullery maid's job is a mainstream historical fact, a necessary and often thankless part of any large household. But in the royal kitchens, the scale of the work was immense, and the conditions were often appalling. The kitchens were a hot, humid, and unsanitary environment. The floor was often covered in grease and refuse, and the rats were a constant companion. You are constantly at risk of burns, cuts, and scrapes from the sharp knives and the hot pots. There is a quirky or fringe tidbit related to this role that adds a layer of grim irony. Since you're in the kitchen, you are technically in a place of great privilege, a place where the king's food is prepared. But you are at the very bottom of the hierarchy, and you're not allowed to eat the food you are preparing. Your meals are often meagre, consisting of leftovers or scraps from the higher-ranking servants. You're constantly surrounded by the scent of delicious food, but you are perpetually hungry. Your job is a constant, cruel reminder of the vast gulf between the lives of the rich and the poor. Historians still argue whether the life of a scullery maid was truly as miserable as it sounds. The debate highlights the vast difference between modern expectations and Tudor realities. Was it a truly miserable existence, or was it a job that, for all its hardships, provided a sense of security and a roof over your head? For a poor girl from the country, a job in the royal kitchens, however menial, could have been a step up in the world. It was a job that, for all its difficulties, was a way to survive in a brutal and unforgiving world. The psychological demands of the job are immense. You're constantly being shouted at, demeaned and treated as if you are a piece of furniture. You're a person who is not even a person, but a tool for someone else's convenience. You're an object, a person who is not even a person, but a means to an end. It is a job that is designed to dehumanize you, to turn you into a living, breathing symbol of the kitchen's endless labour. You go to bed at night, your hands and back aching, the smell of grease and stale food a permanent part of you. You dream of a world where you don't have to scrub, where you don't have to be on your feet all day. But you know that when you wake up, the work will be waiting for you. The scullery maid's job is a testament to the grim realities of life in Tudor England. It's a job that makes you appreciate every single bit of modern technology. The next time you turn on your dishwasher, just think about the people who, centuries ago, had to do it all by hand with no end in sight. And with that thought, we will move on to our next terrifying job, which also involves a lot of filth, but of a different and perhaps even more chilling kind. You've left the grime and the relentless toil of the royal kitchens, but the shadow of the crown still looms large. We move now from the anonymous servant to a very public and utterly reviled figure. You are the executioner, the state's bloody hand, and your job is to carry out state-sanctioned killings. This is a job that is as psychologically taxing as it is physically brutal, and it is a testament to the grim realities of justice in Tudor England. Your life is a paradox. You are a public servant, a man or woman who is paid by the crown to enforce the law. And yet, you are a social pariah, a person who is shunned and reviled by the very people you serve. The executioner's identity was often a closely guarded secret. But in smaller towns, everyone knew who you were. You lived on the outskirts of society, often in a small cottage near the gallows or the scaffold. The people you saw on the street would cross to the other side to avoid you. The children would whisper and point. You are a ghost, a silent, terrifying presence that is a constant reminder of the state's power and its willingness to use violence to enforce its will. The job itself is a brutal and visceral one. You're not a soldier in a battle, you're a technician of death. Your tools are simple and brutal, an axe, a block, a rope. The methods of execution are public and theatrical, a grim spectacle designed to instill fear and obedience in the populace. You are at the centre of this spectacle, a silent, masked figure whose every move is scrutinised by a bloodthirsty crowd. A botched execution, a clumsy swing of the axe, and the crowd could turn on you in an instant. This is a mainstream historical fact. The public nature of executions was a key part of their purpose, and the executioner's performance was a matter of life and death, both for the condemned and for yourself. There is a quirky or fringe tidbit to this profession that adds a layer of quiet horror. The executioner was often tasked with a variety of other less dramatic duties. You might be the local torturer, a person who is called upon to extract confessions from suspects. You might also be the one who carries out public floggings and brandings. Your hands, the hands that take lives, are also the hands that inflict pain. You are a person who is intimately familiar with the anatomy of pain and suffering, and you are a person who is expected to inflict it without emotion or remorse. Historians still argue whether the executioner's job was a form of justice or a form of entertainment. The debate highlights the vast difference between modern ethics and Tudor ones. Were the public executions a necessary part of a just society, or were they a form of brutal, morbid theatre designed to keep the populace in line? The lack of due process and the frequency of executions for even minor crimes suggest that the line between justice and spectacle was often blurred. You are a man or woman who is a key player in this grim drama, a person who is both feared and reviled. The psychological demands of the job are immense. You are a person who is constantly dealing with death and violence. You see the fear in the eyes of the condemned, you hear their last prayers, and you have to perform your duty without emotion. You are a person who is constantly haunted by the faces of the people you have killed. The gallows, the scaffold, the public square. These are your offices, and they are places of immense suffering and pain. You go home at night, and the images of the day replay in your mind. The sound of the axe hitting the block, the crowd's roar, the silent, slack face of the person you have just killed. The blood on your hands is a constant physical reminder of your work. You are a person who is constantly dealing with the most profound questions of life and death, but you're not allowed to feel. You're a machine, a tool for the state's violence, and your humanity is a burden you must bear in silence. The executioner's job is a testament to the grim realities of life in Tudor England. It's a job that makes you appreciate every bit of modern justice and the concept of human dignity. The next time you see a picture of a historical execution, just take a moment to think about the people who, centuries ago, had to do the job. And with that terrifying thought, we will move on to our next job, which also involves a lot of filth, but of a different and perhaps even more chilling kind. You've stepped away from the grim spectacle of the gallows, but you're not free of the detritus of Tudor society. We move now to a new kind of job, one that is less about public spectacle and more about private desperation. You're a mudlark, a person who scavenges for anything of value in the foul, tidal mud of the River Thames. This is a job that is as dangerous as it is disgusting, and it is a testament to the brutal realities of poverty in Tudor England. Your workday begins at low tide, when the river recedes to expose its muddy, rubbish-strewn banks. You're armed with a long pole with a sieve at the end, and a keen eye for anything that glitters. You trudge through the thick, sucking mud, your feet sinking into a putrid mixture of silt, human waste, and centuries of discarded rubbish. The smell is overpowering, a foul blend of decay, chemicals from the tanneries, and the general refuse of a bustling city. You are a human dredger, a person who sifts through the city's waste for a living. The dangers of your job are not just the filth. The river is a treacherous and unpredictable force. A sudden rise in the tide could trap you against the river wall, and the strong currents could sweep you away. The mud itself can be a death trap, a thick sucking morass that can swallow you whole. You're constantly at risk of disease from the raw sewage and the decaying animal carcasses that litter the riverbank. Cuts and scrapes from the broken glass and sharp metal hidden in the mud can easily become infected, leading to a slow and painful death. This is a mainstream historical fact. Mudlarking was a recognised trade, and it was a brutally dangerous one. The mudlarks were a part of the Thames's ecosystem, a human scavenger who lived off the city's cast-offs. There is a quirky or fringe tidbit related to this profession that adds a layer of grim irony. The things you find in the mud are not just rubbish. You might find a lost coin, a piece of broken jewellery, a dropped button, or a rusty tool. These things, worthless to the people who lost them, are your livelihood. You're a person who finds treasure in the trash, a person who makes a living from the carelessness of others. It's a bizarre form of archaeology, where you're not looking for grand artefacts, but for the mundane, everyday objects that tell a story of the city's past. Historians still argue whether the life of a mudlark was a genuine trade or a form of extreme poverty. The debate highlights the vast difference between our modern view of work and the Tudor one. Was it a job, or was it a desperate form of begging? The high risk and the low pay suggest it was a job for the most desperate, those who had no other choice. It was a job that, for all its dangers, provided a sense of independence and a way to survive in a brutal and unforgiving world. You're a ghost of the city, a man or woman who works in a world that no one wants to think about, a world of filth and decay. The psychological demands of the job are immense. You're constantly being demeaned and treated as if you were a piece of refuse yourself. You're a person who is not even a person, but a tool for someone else's convenience. You're an object, a person who is not even a person, but a means to an end. It is a job that is designed to dehumanize you, to turn you into a living, breathing symbol of the city's endless waste. You go home at night, your clothes and skin caked in grime, the smell of the river a permanent part of you. You scrub and scrub, but you know you will never be truly clean. The memory of the darkness, the rats, and the overwhelming stench will stay with you forever. The mudlark's job is a testament to the grim realities of life in Tudor England. It's a job that makes you appreciate every bit of modern sanitation and infrastructure. The next time you see a river, just think about the people who, centuries ago, had to crawl into that river and risk their lives to find a few coins. And with that terrifying thought, we will move on to our next job, which also involves a lot of filth, but of a different and perhaps even more chilling kind. You've left the foul mud of the Thames behind, but the grime of Tudor London still finds a way to cling to you. We move from the horizontal filth of the river to the vertical filth of the city's chimneys. Your new job is that of a chimney sweep, a person who cleans the soot and ash from the city's fireplaces and flues. This is a job that is as physically demanding as it is terrifying, and it is a testament to the brutal realities of child labour in Tudor England. Your workday begins at dawn, with a climb. The chimneys of the Tudor era are not the clean modern flues we have today. They are narrow, twisting, and often unlined, a dark, labyrinthine maze of brick and soot, and you, as the sweep, are a child, often no older than 5 or 6. Your small size is a key qualification for the job, as you're the only one who can fit into the narrowest parts of the chimney. Your tools are simple, a brush and a scraper. Your job is to climb up the chimney, scraping the soot and tar from the walls, and then to climb back down, often choking on the fine black powder. The dangers of your job are immense. The chimneys are often still hot from the night before, and the soot can ignite, turning your workspace into a fiery furnace. The air is thick with a choking, carcinogenic soot that you inhale with every breath. Over time, this soot will cause a host of respiratory ailments, from chronic coughs to a debilitating and often fatal cancer of the scrotum, a grim and specific disease known as chimney sweep's cancer. This is a mainstream historical fact. The high rates of cancer among chimney sweeps were a known and terrible reality of their trade. You are a person who is, in essence, a walking time bomb, a child whose life is being shortened with every job. There is a quirky or fringe tidbit related to this profession that adds a layer of quiet horror. Since you are a child, you are often a victim of the cruelty of your master. Your master, the adult chimney sweep, would often force you to climb a chimney that was still burning, a practice known as lighting a fire under you. The fire would not be hot enough to kill you, but it would be hot enough to force you to climb faster, to move through the chimney with a sense of urgency. It's a brutal and sadistic form of motivation, and it is a testament to the lack of compassion and the brutality of life in Tudor England. Historians still argue whether the high rates of chimney sweeps' cancer were a direct result of the soot, or if it was also a combination of other factors, such as poor diet and a lack of hygiene. The debate highlights the vast difference between our modern understanding of disease and the Tudor one. The link between the soot and the cancer was eventually made, but not until centuries later. In the Tudor era, the deaths of chimney sweeps were simply seen as a part of life, a grim reality of a dangerous trade. You are a person who is, in essence, a living experiment, a child whose body is being slowly poisoned by the very air you breathe. The physical demands of the job are immense. You're often working in a crouched, uncomfortable position, in the dark, with a brush. Your knees and elbows are constantly scraped and bruised. The claustrophobia of the enclosed space, the darkness, and the constant fear of a fire or a collapse make every single moment a waking nightmare. You're a ghost of the city, a child who works in a world that no one wants to think about, a world of filth and decay. You finish your day, your clothes and skin a permanent black smear of soot. The smell of the chimney is a part of you, a grim reminder of your daily toil. You go home to a small dark room, and you scrub and scrub, but you know you will never be truly clean. The memory of the darkness, the heat, and the overwhelming stench will stay with you forever. The chimney sweep's job is a testament to the grim realities of life in Tudor England. It's a job that makes you appreciate every bit of modern industrial safety, and the concept of child labour laws. It would sweep through cities and towns with a brutal efficiency, killing a third or more of the population, and when it came, the wealthy would flee to the countryside, leaving the poor and the sick behind. That is where you come in. You are a person who, for whatever reason, a lack of other options, a sense of duty, or a desperate need for money, has chosen to stay and care for the infected. Your workplace is the home of the sick, a place of profound suffering and despair. The air is thick with the smell of fevered bodies, of festering buboes, and of death. You're armed with a simple cloth mask soaked in vinegar, a practice that was believed to ward off the bad air or miasma that was thought to cause the disease. This is a mainstream historical fact. The reliance on miasma theory and the use of masks was a common practice during plague outbreaks, but the masks, for all their symbolic value, were no match for the true cause of the disease, the fleas on the rats we talked about earlier. There is a quirky or fringe tidbit related to this profession that adds a layer of quiet horror. Since you are in constant contact with the infected, you are essentially a walking, breathing carrier of the disease, but you are also a source of comfort and care for people who have been abandoned by their families and friends. You are the last person they see, the last person who touches them, the last person who offers them a cup of water or a kind word. You are a person who is both feared and reviled, a necessary part of society, but also an outcast who is constantly at risk. Historians still argue whether the efforts of the pestilence nurses had a significant impact on the plague outbreaks. The debate highlights the vast difference between modern medicine and Tudor efforts. Were your efforts to care for the sick a genuine form of public health, or were they simply a desperate and largely ineffective attempt to combat a force that was too powerful and too insidious to be controlled? Given the lack of understanding of germ theory and the unsanitary conditions of the time, it's likely that the nurses were fighting a losing battle. The disease was simply too powerful, and the conditions were too perfect for it to thrive. The dangers of your job are not just the plague itself. You're also at risk from the other creatures that live in the shadows. The families of the dead, crazed with grief, could turn on you. The other people in the neighbourhood, terrified of contagion, might refuse to let you into their homes or even attack you. You're a person who is constantly on your guard, constantly at risk, and constantly alone. You finish your day, your clothes and skin caked in the grime of the sick room, the smell of death a permanent part of you. You take your pay, but you know that the money, however good, is a small compensation for the risks you take. You are a person who is living on borrowed time, and you know it. The sight of a child's face, a mother's last breath, a father's agonizing death. These are the constant, terrifying companions of your job. The pestilence nurse's job is a testament to the grim realities of life in Tudor England. It's a job that makes you appreciate every bit of modern medicine and the concept of a vaccine. The next time you hear about a disease outbreak, just take a moment to be thankful that you don't have to be the one who cares for the sick with a simple mask and a prayer. And with that terrifying thought, we will move on to our next job, which also involves a lot of filth, but of a different and perhaps even more chilling kind. You've stepped away from the silent terror of the plague house, but the brutality of Tudor life has one last grim spectacle for you. We move now to a place of public entertainment, a pit of sanctioned violence and casual cruelty. You are a bear warden, a person whose job it is to train and manage fighting bears for the popular but savage sport of bear baiting. This is a job that is as physically dangerous as it is morally repugnant, and it is a testament to the dark side of Tudor culture. Bear baiting was a sport that was enjoyed by all classes of Tudor society, from the lowliest peasant to the king himself. The spectacle involved chaining a bear to a post and setting a pack of dogs on it. The crowd would cheer and bet on the outcome, a grim spectacle of blood and violence, and you, as the bear warden, are the keeper of this living weapon, the person who is responsible for training the bear, keeping it in fighting condition, and ensuring that it performs to the crowd's satisfaction. Your workplace is the bear pit, a circular arena with a high wall and a central post. The air is thick with the smell of animal musk, sweat, and blood. Your bear is a magnificent but dangerous creature, often a captured wild animal that has been starved and abused into submission. Your job is to train it, a process that involves a combination of fear, pain, and a very small amount of food. You're constantly at risk of being mauled. A single misstep or a moment of carelessness could result in a fatal attack. This is a mainstream historical fact. Bear baiting was a popular sport in Tudor England, and the bear warden was a common figure in the world of public entertainment. There is a quirky or fringe tidbit related to this profession that adds a layer of quiet horror. The bears were often given names like Sackerson or Harry Hunks, and they were seen as celebrities of a sort. People would travel for miles to see a famous bear fight. This bizarre form of celebrity status is a testament to the strange and often contradictory nature of Tudor culture, where a creature that was abused and tormented for sport could also be a source of national pride. You are the keeper of this celebrity, a person who is responsible for its life and its death. Historians still argue whether the popularity of bear baiting was a sign of a genuinely cruel and brutal society, or if it was simply a form of entertainment that we, with our modern sensibilities, cannot understand. The debate highlights the vast difference between our modern view of animal welfare and the Tudor one. Was it a form of entertainment that was born of a lack of other options, or was it a form of sadistic pleasure that was ingrained in the culture? The lack of other options for public entertainment and the sheer brutality of the sport suggest that it was a combination of both. You are a person who is a key player in this grim drama, a person who is both feared and reviled. The physical dangers of your job are immense. You are constantly in contact with a wild, unpredictable animal. The bears, for all their training, are still wild creatures, and a moment of anger or fear could result in a fatal attack. The dogs, bred for their ferocity, are also a constant threat. You are a person who is living on borrowed time, and you know it. The sight of a bear's claws, the sound of its roar, the feel of its hot, angry breath on your face, these are the constant, terrifying companions of your job. You finish your day, your clothes and skin caked in the grime of the bear pit, the smell of animal musk and blood a permanent part of you. You take your pay, but you know that the money, however good, is a small compensation for the risks you take. You are a person who is living on borrowed time, and you know it. The bear warden's job is a testament to the grim realities of life in Tudor England. It's a job that makes you appreciate every bit of modern animal welfare and the concept of a humane society. The next time you see a picture of a historical sport, just take a moment to think about the people who, centuries ago, had to do the job. And with that terrifying thought, we will move on to our wind down, a moment of quiet reflection on the horrors we have just witnessed. The air is slowly growing still, the sounds of the Tudor world, the clang of the blacksmith, the roar of the bear-baiting crowd, the whispers of the whipping boy, they're all fading now, like a half-remembered dream. You can let them go. The weight of all that history, all that grime and all that terror is not yours to carry. The gong farmer's stench, the taster's fear, the pestilence nurse's courage, they're all a part of a past that is now safely in the past. You're here now, in your own comfortable bed, a world away from the soot of the chimney and the blood of the bear pit. Remember how you felt at the beginning of our journey, how you thought your boss was the worst. Now, with a little perspective, I hope you feel a little more at peace. The quiet hum of the fan, the softness of your sheets, the simple knowledge that you don't have to empty a cesspit tonight. These are small, simple gifts. The Tudor world was a harsh one, a world where survival was a daily struggle and comfort was a luxury few could afford. But you live in a world where you can simply dim the lights and close your eyes. Let that comfort, that profound and simple comfort, wash over you. The long night is over now. The history is written. All you have to do is sleep. Let the worries of the day float away. Let the images of the past fade into a soft, hazy blur. You are safe. You are warm. You are at peace.